Hey everyone, welcome to REN-SHEN Half Spirit, Chapter 7, Megumi. Steve arrived at the dojo the following morning. Sensei Taki welcomed him and showed him to a small room at the back of the dojo. It was even smaller than his former hotel room, but it looked comfortable enough and would serve him well for a few days or even weeks. Sensei Taki told Steve about the plans he had decided the night before. He said he went out drinking the previous evening and developed his final strategy in the second or third to last bar he visited. "You will find and teach the gaijin in my dojo. I know you have excellent karate skills and you have strong positive energy. You will find many students and I will pay you to teach them." Steve said, "But Sensei Taki, I must go to Okinawa soon. I don't think I'll be here for very long. I'm not sure." Sensei Taki replied, "You can leave any time. It is your choice. But please, let us try for a little. It is important for you to practice your teaching, you know. And I can teach you about Okinawa. There is much to know before you go there." Steve did know. He'd been teaching back home in Australia under Sensei Mike's supervision. Teaching would not be difficult. The difficult part would be how he would extract himself from there. Sensei Taki asked Steve if he brought his belt with him. Steve said, I do have it, but I did not want to wear it in your dojo." Sensei Taki said, "If Sensei Mike calls you a black belt level, then you are probably almost the same level as me at 3rd Dan. I do not question your ability. You must wear it. You earned it under my great brother Sensei Mike." Steve was to take the first class. Sensei Taki introduced Steve to the class and said he would be assisting him. The mostly Japanese students looked surprised to be led by young Steve, a foreigner. As accustomed back home, Steve led the entire class in the Japanese language. He seemed to create a pulsing energy in the dojo. It was positively infectious. Everyone raised their level of energy. Steve demanded more from the students, and they responded immediately. Sensei Taki looked on approvingly. It was an excellent session, Steve thought. Some students thanked him for the class and promised Steve they would try harder next time. Others wanted to know more about him and practice their English with him. It was enjoyable. The students had left and Steve approached Sensei Taki to ask if he was pleased with how the class was conducted. Sensei Taki said, "You show great ability, Steve-san. I have never seen a foreigner with your ability, and I have not seen many Japanese with your ability either. You have made Sensei Mike very, very proud, and you have embarrassed me. I feel ashamed. You have reminded me of who I once was and what I have now become." He bowed deeply to Steve in a very sincere and respectful way. No way a sensei of his own school should bow to me that way, Steve thought to himself. Steve wanted to swing the pendulum in Sensei Taki's favor and thought of a subdued way to return some respect. "I would like to prepare tea for you, Sensei Taki, if you allow me," Steve said. Soon he performed a tea ceremony with the precision and mindfulness in the manner demanded by Sensei Mike. Sensei Taki seemed almost tearful in the way the ceremony was conducted. He said, "I look at you and I only see the old ways. You are a true son of Goju-Ru." He continued, "We will have lunch soon. I expect it to be delivered shortly. My niece never forgets her best Uncle Taki." Steve was disappointed. He was thinking he could just sneak out and grab a few delightful onigiri, and his life would be harmonious and full of the joy that only those tasty morsels could possibly bring. He thought, the longer I'm outside, the more chance I'll find that sweet love of my life. Nevertheless, Steve accepted his fate. He would buy some onigiri later and endure this lunch, no matter how much less exciting the food was. Shortly thereafter, he heard the front door open and footsteps coming towards the back room of the dojo. Sensei Taki started wiggling on the spot. He said, "My niece always brings nice food for me. She's made me very fat. Well, maybe the beer has helped also." "There you are, my dear niece. Please meet my new assistant teacher." Steve turned around and exclaimed, "It's you!" He was pointing at her with that starry-eyed look again. He just kept pointing. The girl dropped one of the dishes and turned bright red. She was in just as much shock as Steve. Sensei Taki quickly realized who she was in Steve's mind. Before his mouth could say anything, his body did the talking. He jumped up and stood between Steve and the nameless girl of his dreams, as if to declare she was completely out of bounds. "This is my niece, Megumi. She is too young for a boyfriend or even looking at a boy. She is only 18, he said. Steve just heard the name, Megumi. He was immediately transported. He knew the word. In some contexts, it meant blessing. In other contexts, it meant love. And he just kept saying, Megumi, blessing, love, Megumi. Over and over, as if in a trance. Sensei Taki quickly thanked his niece and ushered her out of the room. Megumi was taller than Sensei Taki, and she poked her head over his shoulder and said, "I asked your hotel about you and they said you were..." By that stage, Sensei Taki had almost thrown her out of the dojo. Steve had found her, and she was also looking for him. Destiny was smiling on Steve. It was his best day ever. Days passed, and Steve's absolute highlight was lunchtime. Megumi would deliver the food, and Sensei Taki seemed to regard each lunch as another challenge and triumph when he managed to keep Steve away from his precious niece. Sometimes Sensei Taki would try to limit interactions and meet Megumi at the front door, and Steve would bounce around in the background. Steve thrived on Megumi's captivating smile. He tried every possible way to extract information from Sensei Taki about Megumi, but his responses were consistently rigid and dismissive. There's no information to be had from this man, Steve thought to himself. The classes were growing. The young Japanese students had been talking about their cool new foreign sensei, Steve, and a number of Japanese and foreigners had joined the classes. Additional sessions were added, and Steve was extremely busy, and he would be making good money for an 18-year-old in a foreign city. But he wasn't going to have any chance to spend anything. He was quite simply too busy. Sensei Taki had stopped visiting his favourite bars in Golden Gate. He would stay home and drink a little less than usual and play his favourite music to Steve. There would be endless rotations of Hako Yamasaki's music from the 1970s, and Sensei Taki would try to play the chords on his beloved Kazuo Yairi acoustic guitar. In return, Steve would play the likes of Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath to Sensei Taki, who would always end up looking genuinely confused and ask, "When does the music begin?" Much to Steve's disappointment, of course. Sensei Taki would then return to playing his beloved Hako Yamasaki tunes. The more drunk he became, the more he became convinced he matched her pitch perfectly. Steve didn't think so, but wouldn't dare say. Surprisingly, he quite enjoyed listening to her soulful voice. Such an oddly pleasant departure from his normal diet of 1970s rock. The attraction between Megumi and Steve was obvious. She would linger around the dojo, stealing furtive glances through the windows at Steve. Steve was intoxicated by her. He couldn't understand what was happening with himself. He would forget how to perform simple tasks, such as how to talk and breathe whenever she was near. If he managed to string together a few words to her, it was a major achievement, because there were millions of other words, thoughts, wishes and desires competing for attention in his mind. He'd never felt so frustrated, yet excited in his life. Finally, it was Sunday and Steve had a day off. He told Sensei Taki he would go out to explore Tokyo, as he really hadn't seen much of it since his arrival. In fact, he waited around the corner for lunchtime. Megumi would always leave her workplace and drop off the lunch dutifully to her uncle at 12:15 every day. This time, Steve would catch her outside. She was even more reliable than the Japanese rail system. There she was, except she wasn't wearing her formal business suit. This time she was wearing an explosion of colours, and her hair wasn't pulled back. It was down, and she even had different coloured ribbons in her hair. She was wearing the latest casual fashion, and she still managed to look elegant, as always. She was already perfect, but today she's even more perfect, he thought to himself. He startled her when he called her name, and there was that blush of hers again. Megumi gestured for him to wait there while she took the food to her uncle. It seemed like an eternity before she came back. Megumi apologized, saying Uncle insisted we eat together. I brought food for both of you and he didn't want to waste it. Steve asked Megumi where she was going. She said it was her day off. She was going shopping in Harajuku. He asked if it would be okay if he could accompany her. She covered her smile with her hand and ran on ahead. Steve just stood there until she waved him over and told him to hurry up. It was a brilliant day. Steve was smitten and had a voracious appetite for information about her. He was entirely infatuated with Megumi, and he learned so much about her on their first outing together. But there was so much to learn, and he needed to know everything. They had many more outings together. Megumi worked in reception at a nearby hotel. She had such an elegant charm. Steve would sometimes wait for her in the hotel lobby and watch how she dealt with hotel guests and other staff. Anyone who was fortunate enough to interact with her were convinced they were the most important person in the world. But Megumi only had eyes for Steve, and he felt precisely the same way about her. Steve and Megumi were inseparable. They would call each other baby love. It was a lyric from Megumi's favourite artist, Anri. She would sing Anri's Last Summer Whisper to Steve, and he would be dreamily bewitched. The intense attraction was mutual, and it was only a matter of time before Sensei Taki realised what was going on and tried to put a stop to the relationship. Megumi loved her uncle dearly. He was her mother's brother, and her mother had died in a traumatic accident 3 years earlier. Her relationship with her father was strained, and Uncle Taki had done everything in his power to care for his beloved niece. Though it seemed to Steve she did more to care for her uncle than the other way around. In any case, it was obvious there was a deep mutual affection and bond between Megumi and her beloved uncle. Steve quickly adapted to the Japanese language, and Sensei Taki preferred to speak Japanese on matters of importance. He pleaded with Steve, "Steve, you are a very good young man. I am proud to know you, and I believe your future will be great. If Megumi was my daughter, I would welcome you into our family. But please know that there is more to know about Megumi than you realize. I am worried about both of your safety. If you pursue this relationship with Megumi, you must understand that her father is a powerful and evil man. He will never accept a gaijin such as you for his daughter. This man is immoral. I hated how he treated my sister, and I was powerless to intervene. I left Okinawa to get away from his evil tentacles there, only to find his influence here. To this day, I cannot even be sure my sister died accidentally. You should ask your sensei Mike about him. He had to flee Okinawa to escape his wickedness." Steve quickly, in an exclamation of disbelief, asked, "Kumicho? The Yakuza leader who Sensei Mike was working for in Okinawa?" Sensei Taki looked shocked to hear Kumicho mentioned. He said, "I'm surprised Mike told you about him. It was not a good time in his life. His relationship with our sensei, and indeed all of us, suffered as a result. It seems Mike told you many things. The man truly suffered for his love. I really do hope he is better now." Steve finally decided he must tell Sensei Taki about Sensei Mike. He explained the events of the terrible tournament, the death of Sensei Mike and his own father, how Demon Hiro had found Sensei Mike. Tears fell freely from Steve's face as he allowed himself to be immersed in that misery for the first time in a long time. Steve couldn't bring himself to reveal the extent of the power he himself unleashed that terrible day. Perhaps he still couldn't understand it himself, or maybe he just didn't want to think about it. Sensei Taki was visibly shaken by what he learned. His heart was broken for Sensei Mike and also for Steve, and it was painfully clear he truly cared for them both. He became somber and silent for an uncomfortable length of time. Finally, he said, "I hope Mike found his beloved Chiasa. She was his only comfort. I am sorry for your losses, Steve. I do not understand why your father was killed at the command of Demon Hiro. Hiro is no longer of this world. His life force comes from elsewhere now. I also do not understand how you managed to beat Demon Hiro's hench monsters. Many of them used to be my dojo brothers back in Okinawa, before they followed the darkness. There is much to learn about you. But you must know it was Kumicho who burnt me out of my own home in Shinjuku. The hotel where Megumi now works stands in its place. He is the owner, and he has done this all over Shinjuku and beyond, as his power and influence grows unabated. I have never told Megumi who her real employer is. She would not stay there. She hates her father and also suspects he killed her mother. The only reason Kumicho's henchmen do not try to kill me is because he does not allow it. He still tries to bring his only child back to Okinawa. She would never return if she learned my death was at his command. If you saw Demon Hero and the terrible power he summons, you must know that the Kumicho has much older and stronger power. He has the blood of an emperor, the heart of a vagrant thief, and the soul of a demon. So you see, I am not only protecting Megumi, it is for all of our protection. It was Steve's turn to digest the new information. He thought about how complex life had become. Only months earlier he had simple dreams and uncomplicated ideas. He looked at Sensei Taki, and it was a look of resolve of a man many years older than he was. He said, "Sensei Taki, thank you for explaining so much to me. Please know, what you're asking me is to never breathe again. I've lost everything that was dear to me back home in Australia. Megumi has been my cure. She washes my sadness with her smile, and her love has cured the pain in my soul. To lose her is to lose my reason for living. I'm prepared to accept any consequences as a result of loving Megumi. I'm sorry if my actions will bring pain, but I've given myself to Megumi for this life. I can't turn away from her. I will defend her with my life, just as I tried to save Sensei Mike from Demon Hero when I made him human again. I'll use every power within me to fight the evil of Kumicho and his minions if they come for us. Please forgive me for being so bold, but my intentions are not for negotiation. If you can't accept this, I understand. With deep sorrow, I will make preparations to leave." Sensei Taki understood the gravity of Steve's words and accepted the resignation in his heart. "Steve-san," he said, "I can see I won't be able to change your mind. The path you have chosen will not be without consequence. It seems we have both dedicated our lives to our Megumi. A worthy recipient, we both agree. Steve, I cannot stand in your way. Such deep love should be placed on a pedestal for all to praise, not be denied. You have my blessing and support for what it's worth." Steve breathed a sigh of relief. He was grateful for the blessing and really wanted the approval from Sensei Taki, who had become dear to him. He wanted to jump up and down with joy, but Sensei Taki continued. "But please tell me, how did you manage to cast the demon out of Hiro? My sensei has gone mad since he summoned the power to control Hiro and his gun. I believe he unleashed many demons unexpectedly that day, and his spirit continues to fight them. A normal person would have been consumed by the demons, but my sensei has a strong spirit which refuses to be defeated by them. He suffers for this and has had no respite since that day. To be honest, I am not sure I can trust him fully anymore. Is it possible you have the power to restore my sensei's spirit?" "I don't know about this, Sensei Taki, but I would do anything to help him. I know Sensei Mike loved and admired his sensei dearly, and I will honor Sensei Mike's memory in the best way I can," Steve said. Sensei Taki said to Steve, "We will have much to do in the future, but I must insist on one thing. I would prefer you call me Uncle Taki. You are already family to me, and your skills are beyond mine, in many ways. I refuse to be acknowledged as a higher rank than you." Steve said he was extremely uncomfortable with this. He respected Sensei Taki and his dojo. They eventually agreed he would continue to call Taki as sensei in his dojo and uncle outside of the dojo. They both bowed to each other formally and then hugged each other with great affection. Neither of them realized Megumi had arrived just a few moments earlier and was listening. She realised Uncle Taki had accepted her relationship with Steve and squealed with delight as she moved forwards and hugged both of them. Megumi seemed to blossom with her uncle's acceptance of their relationship. She had already truly committed her heart and soul to Steve, but the blessing from her uncle gave her the freedom to express her devotion to Steve publicly. She even joined Steve's karate classes and displayed surprising skill with an incredible capacity to learn. Steve was extremely impressed with her progress. She was an excellent student and Steve taught her everything he knew. What she didn't have in strength, she had in resourcefulness and speed. Steve certainly had an advantage when it came to karate skills, but they were both blissfully unaware of matters in the art of lovemaking. Megumi's experience was limited to holding a boy's hand when she was 15. Steve was only a little more enlightened. There was once a night at a disco where a girl forced her tongue in his mouth, and after he recovered from the shock of the invasion, soon taught him how to kiss. Luckily, Steve and Megumi required little assistance. They couldn't keep their hands away from each other, and an unbridled passion was their guide. It had only been a few months in Tokyo when Steve finally moved in with Megumi. Their life was idyllic. They were already discussing marriage and planning their future together. Megumi wanted to live in Australia with Steve. Steve didn't miss home one bit, but would do anything for his baby love. He felt obliged to go to Okinawa to fulfill Sensei Mike's hope for him, to formalise his Goju-Ryu qualifications. Every time he brought up the idea, Megumi quickly found something else more important to discuss. It was clear she didn't want to be anywhere near her father from what Uncle Taki had said to him. She was not well over there, Steve's son. Her father's influence there was very strong, and it made her very sick as a child, Uncle Taki said. But surely Steve could protect her from his attention. He pleaded with Megumi on numerous occasions. After repeated attempts over many months, he said, "My baby, I don't have university qualifications. You can see I've dedicated myself to Goju-Ryu. It makes sense for me to earn the highest qualifications possible in my art. Training in Okinawa will give me something we can use to make money in the future and provide for our family." Megumi said, "My Steve, you don't know my life back in Okinawa. Everybody pretends to respect and admire my father there, but they all just fear him. He can take one look at a person and know what will be their downfall. He plays with them all. I've never known anyone to be a true friend there. Everyone was too scared to upset me for fear of retribution from my father. I'm sure my mother did not die in an accident. I still believe my father did it, and I refuse to be anywhere near that monster of a man. All my life I've been haunted by him. His darkness terrorized me as a child, and I was very sick when I was growing up. Don't look at me now. I've pushed him away from my life and my health has improved. I know I work in a hotel he owns. I dare not tell Uncle Taki. I know it was my father's criminals who burnt him out of his home to buy the land cheaper. If I go to work anywhere else, he'll just buy it anyway. He's more than persuasive. He will leave you no choice. I even remember your Sensei Mike back when I was a young girl. He had no choice, and I will never forget the sadness in his eyes. I cannot let you be caught up in my father's terrible web. He will take away your honor and replace it with evil. I will lose my Steve, my baby love, who I love with every part of my being." It broke Steve's heart to see how much pain his beautiful Megumi had clearly suffered at the hands of her father. He couldn't understand how such evil intent was possible from a father to his child. He recalled the lifelong sacrifices his own father had made for him, and then mournfully recalled his father's ultimate sacrifice at the presentation ceremony. Steve was grateful Megumi had Uncle Taki in her life. He clearly loved his niece and had her best interests at heart. It surprised him to learn that Megumi knew her father owned the hotel where she was employed. Uncle Taki didn't dare tell her what she already knew. Steve resolved to never let his beautiful baby love suffer at the hands of that monster again. "I just can't understand how a man can be so evil to his own child," he said. The discussion appeared to send Megumi back into her own private hell as she gently rocked herself and explained, My bloodline is cursed. My ancestor was an emperor, and his child was nothing more than a thief and a murderer. This is the curse of my family line. My father is the greatest thief. He's truly a demon, my Steve, and nobody can stop him. Please, Steve, we can find another way, far away from Japan, far away from him. We can make a new life in Australia or wherever you want. Steve resigned himself to the fact that circumstances would have to dramatically change for them to go to Okinawa. He did, however, still feel that he should go there one day, even if it was to try and help Sensei Mike's teacher. Steve never explained Temyana or what Babarada had told him about his own bloodline. All of that seemed to be a distant memory for him, and he started to doubt any of it. But he thought to himself, imagine if we had a child, the blood of a royal union. He smiled at his beautiful Megumi and said, whatever makes you happy, my sweet love, as he pulled her close and tasted her sweet lips again. Oh dear. The truest and deepest of loves. Steve has his Megumi. Some of you who've read it will probably be pronouncing it Megumi. Well, you know, that's probably the English way of saying it, the Aussie way. Megumi, I'm sure, would sit better in Japanese. So I hope I didn't offend you with that. But, the deepest of loves, isn't it? I think it's beautiful. So we found out that Uncle Taki's a bit of a, or Sensei Taki and Uncle Taki. We weren't sure about him, but we're sure about him now, I think. I think we're very sure. We realise he's a serious, top quality guy, looking after his niece, his sister's daughter, loves her to death, absolutely adores her, and would do anything for her. And she would do the same for him. She adores her uncle. She was starting to rock herself as she was thinking about her time back in Okinawa, living with her father and being tested and challenged by him all the time. There is royal blood in the bloodline on her side. Her ancestor was an emperor, and it appears the emperor's son was a murderer. I think we might find something out about that later on, but it paints a picture of Kumicho, Megumi's father. Not the nicest of people so far, from what we can gather. I don't have much more to add, but I hope we enjoyed the little love story there. That was beautiful. It was the beginning of a relationship that will endure eternity, I feel. I'm sure of that. So Steve loves his baby love. The interesting part of this is I felt compelled to include that sort of terminology. You might think that where the hell did I get it from? Well, I got it from that song, Last Summer Whisper by Henri. That was my original inspiration to actually write the book. So my son sent me a link on YouTube and sent me this incredible song from the 80s, and I listened to it and I thought it was fantastic. And in the chorus, she keeps saying baby love. And so I wanted to remember that. And the particular video clip on YouTube has a little anime with a girl who's from an anime that I'm not even aware of. I apologize to the enthusiasts, who was called Megumi. So I've remembered where my inspiration came from, and I'm always thankful to the people who inspired me to keep going with the storytelling process, just from my comment on that one link on YouTube, which I might include down the bottom here in my comment. So it's just lovely and sweet, and it sends the right message out in that chapter. The chapter was dedicated to our beautiful Megumi, dedicated to the love affair that blossomed. They're already living together, making plans for marriage. They're clearly absolutely in love with each other, and that's a beautiful thing. So who knows where it goes from here. Stay in for the ride. It does get very interesting. I keep promising you that. I'm sure you're going to agree with me soon. Please subscribe, buy the book, ring the bell, do all that sort of stuff, jump through all the hoops. I'm giving you my heart and soul here, guys. Come on, you can do a little bit too. Tell people about this. It's pretty unique. I don't think anyone's doing this. I don't think anyone's reading a book in its entirety. Everyone wants to sell stuff. So I'm not inclined to just beg for money all the time, but I'm hoping you buy the book if you're enjoying this. So that's cool. Thank you. We will see you with chapter 8 coming up shortly.